If everybody could please take their seats, we're going to go ahead and get started. So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Melissa Proffitt, and I am the managing partner of Ice Miller, and also chair of our food and agribusiness group at the firm. And on behalf of my colleagues and my firm, I'd like to welcome you to today's debate. We are honored to be able to support and be a part of such a very important discussion. I want to begin by thanking Beth Archer and Agri Institute for coordinating today's event. As we know, Agri Institute helps to develop leaders to serve agriculture in our rural communities and brings us all together around some of the most important issues affecting agriculture today. We are especially grateful that our Lieutenant Governor candidates, Christina Hale and Suzanne have taken time to be with us out here at the State Fair and to share with them and us their views most critical to Indiana food and agribusiness. And I think we would all agree that there is no better backdrop than the Indiana State Fair to host this dialogue. We owe a lot to Cindy Hoy and to her State Fair team for making this such an amazing destination. With each step that you take on these fairgrounds, from the livestock barns to the Pioneer Village, to the glass barn, to the 4-H exhibits, to the horses, to the unbelievable ever-changing food choices, and to all of the people. And to be able to have such an important political dialogue at the fair only serves to underscore the importance of us coming together to talk and engage about how we can keep Indiana food and agriculture vibrant and growing. As you all know, our Lieutenant Governor serves as our Secretary of Agriculture and Rural Development. I think we can all agree that we have been extremely fortunate in recent years to have political leadership and lieutenant governors in this state that understand the need to support agriculture and to help us compete in our global marketplace. As we celebrate our bicentennial, what a great opportunity before us with Suzanne and Christina to discuss how we prepare Indiana agriculture for our next century. At this time, I'd like to introduce Randy Krohn, the president of Indiana Farm Bureau, to come forward and offer a few comments.
I'd say ladies first. You're fine. Good afternoon. Thank you. Well, it's great to be here on behalf of Indiana Farm Bureau, and we're happy to be a sponsor. And I want to thank the Agri Institute and Beth for putting this together, because any time that we can highlight agriculture, I think it's a great day. What better venue than right here at the State Fair where we showcase Indiana agriculture? There's Beth. I'm sorry I didn't see you there. But what better place right here at State Fair, highlight Indiana agriculture. So on behalf of our 70,000 member families across the state, we're happy to be here, to be a part of this, and to help sponsor it. And we want to say thank you. So with that, looking forward to a great debate and to the ladies on talking about agriculture issues. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to ask Jeanette Merritt, a board member of the Indiana Soybean Alliance, to come up and talk a little bit about her organization and the perspective of the Indiana Corn Growers Association.
Thank you and good afternoon, everyone. Again, like Randy, I will say thanks to Agri Institute and Beth Archer for sponsoring this Lieutenant Governor debate. Having it here at the Indiana State Fairgrounds, of course, is the perfect venue. The State Fairgrounds representing agriculture and all of the excitement that we are having here over those 17 days. I'm excited to hear from the candidates on their views on rural Indiana and the issues that are affecting our farmers and the agribusiness climate in the state. I'm proud to represent the Indiana soybean farmers as a board member and the chair of the Membership and Policy Committee. And just as a reminder, because we always have to say it, ISA's Policy Committee and the Indiana Corn Growers Association pleased to sponsor the debate, but checkoff dollars cannot do anything legislative. So we're always seeking membership, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say we are signing up members today. If we have any farmers in the audience that would like to do that, we're doing that in the back corner. To help craft our message to our lawmakers, Indiana Soybean and Corn are also hosting a series of shop talks in August and September where we gather farmers together, talk about the issues that are important to them and that should be important to our organizations and things we should be working on. Indiana's corn and soybean farmers hope that all of our lieutenant governor candidates understand the importance of agriculture to Indiana, and we look forward to working with both of them to help them understand our farms, our visions, our dreams for the future of those farms, and our excitement for how Indiana agriculture continue to be a leader in generations to come. Thank you.
So here today to help us navigate through this dialogue is someone who needs little, if any, introduction, my good friend Gary Dick. He is the host and creator of Inside Indiana Business Television, and he also serves as president and managing editor of Grow Indiana Media Ventures. This is an organization which focuses on pushing out Indiana business and information across our entire state. What I especially love about Gary, other than his golf game, is that as a commentator and an observer of all things business in Indiana, he is fully embraced and promotes the importance of food and agriculture in our state. He understands that our entire food and ag sector, from crops to livestock to hardwoods to food to energy and now ag biosciences, is a key ingredient to our success in creating new business opportunities and ultimately in growing Indiana's economy. And he isn't shy about telling the story. He talks about Indiana agriculture everywhere, on his television show, in his daily emails, on the web, and all over Twitter. So Gary, thank you for what you do as being a champion of Indiana agriculture and guiding our conversation today. Please welcome Gary Dick.
Melissa, thank you for that very kind introduction, and for all you and Ice Miller continue to do to support agriculture and so many important initiatives around the state. Good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure to be here today to serve as the moderator for what I think you will find to be an interesting, hope that wasn't an omen, interesting and informative day on some important issues. This, I think, is a really important time for agriculture. Challenges, to be sure, but lots of excitement around the state of Indiana with the creation and the formation of things like AgriNovus and the Indiana Grown Initiative. And really what I think is fascinating to watch is this growing collaboration between the private sector and all the private sector companies we're fortunate to have here, and state government, and also academic institutions as well. So lots going on in that regard. I know many of you know, but if you don't know, Agri-Institute is pleased to host the Lieutenant Governor's debate. This is the 6th time for the organization to host the debate. Agri-Institute prepares leaders to advance agriculture, facilitates a robust network of ag and rural leaders. The organization really is, in so many ways, committed to seeding knowledge, growing skills, nurturing passion, and connecting leaders to serve ag and rural communities throughout Indiana. And today's event is one very important way that the members of Indiana's agriculture and rural communities can become better informed about the important decisions they'll make when they are voting in November. The work of Agri-Institute is supported by individuals and corporate investors. And let's take a moment to thank, in a big way, this year's debate sponsors: Ice Miller, LLP, Indiana Farm Bureau, Inc., and the Indiana Soybean Alliance Membership and Policy Committee, and Indiana Corn Growers Association. I bet a big round of applause to thank them. Once again, we thank the Indiana State Fair Board, the Commission, staff, and Executive Director Cindy Hoy for providing this venue and the staging for today's event. With that, I would like to introduce the candidates now. Now, bios and some great information on the candidates are in your program. So rather than go over all that, I'll just make a very brief introduction of each of the candidates. We have the Republican nominee for Lieutenant Governor, Suzanne Crouch; the Democratic nominee for Lieutenant Governor, Christina Hale. Thank you both for being here. It's okay to clap now. We don't want you to clap later. That's in the rules. Very quickly, the rules. The order presentation was determined by a coin toss prior to the debate. The winner gets the first opening statement, first question, and first closing statement. The order will be Suzanne Crouch and then Christina Hale. Each candidate will have up to 5 minutes for the opening statement, 2.5 minutes for a closing statement. Each candidate receives 1.5 minutes to answer questions. There will be no rebuttal. Time will be monitored by a timekeeper, notifying each candidate of 30 seconds, 15 seconds remaining, and then time up. The topics, not the questions, but the topics for discussion have been agreed upon by all parties. There will be no audience participation. Candidates are not allowed to reference members of the audience or anyone in the area. No one from the audience will be allowed to ask a question either. The audience, I would ask that you please refrain from clapping, cheering, displaying signs, and otherwise participating in the program. And the debate will be 1 hour in length. We've got our timekeeper to keep us on task with that. Should also mention that the debate today is being streamed live, right, via Hoosier Ag Today. And Gary, thank you for that. That's a great gesture to have this streamed live to a statewide audience and beyond. And very importantly, for those of you on social media, we're using the hashtag LGDebate, hashtag LGDebate. It's my pleasure now to introduce some panelists who graciously agreed to volunteer their time to be here and pose questions to the candidates. We have Megan Grebner-Conant. I think I got it right? Megan, thank you for being here. She's the Indiana Director for Brownfield Network. Gary Truitt, Hoosier Ag Today, the founder of that organization. And Gary, it's great to have you, as well as John Ketzenberger, a longtime journalist and president of the Indiana Fiscal Policy Institute. How about a round of applause for our panel? Okay, got the formalities out of the way. I think we're ready to begin with opening statements. And by virtue of the coin toss, Suzanne Crouch, you are first up and have up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Jerry. And thank you all for the opportunity to be here. And thank you, Beth and the Agri Institute. And to the farmers and farm families here today, thank you. I just want to mention how honored I am to be on the stage with Christina Hale. We served together in the General Assembly, and she is a well-respected legislator, and I'm happy to be here with her. I grew up and was raised in southwestern Indiana, Vanderburgh County, and it is a part of the state that is very rich in agriculture. My parents raised me with good values, and they instilled in me a set of principles that helped shape my beliefs. I believe in hard work. I believe that we have a responsibility, a personal responsibility, to take care of ourselves and yet to help others. And I believe the trust that a taxpayer grants an elected official is sacred. And every dollar that government spent should be done so with serious respect and consideration for those dollars, because every dollar that comes to government has a name and a face attached to it. As your Lieutenant Governor, I'm not going to know all the answers, but you in this room do. And I am not afraid to ask the hard questions and to bring together the right people to get to the best solutions. Now, we can talk about any number of issues, but let me focus on 3 today. First, infrastructure. Last year, I traveled all 92 counties because I know, as a former county auditor, county commissioner, state representative, and now a state auditor, how important it is for local and state government to work together for solutions. And in my travels, I recognize once again the importance of infrastructure to our state, but particularly to our rural areas. Let me be clear. We must not rest until we have a long-term solution to our infrastructure funding. And with that, we need to improve broadband connectivity and technology and telecommunications. And we must do that to the last mile. And we must do that in order to retain our competitive edge. Economic development. Indiana has been a leader in so many areas in economic development, and agriculture has enjoyed in that success. But we must continue to pursue every opportunity out there for our ag economy. And rural communities, more than anyone, need economic development options in order to be viable. And that includes our farm families that need that opportunity for their livestock farms. Do you know, in terms of what we do, we must do it together. And we must continue to be sure that government is working for you. Abraham Lincoln said, and I'm kind of paraphrasing, but Abraham Lincoln said, government should do for people only what they cannot do better for themselves, and no more. And I have lived by that philosophy as a county auditor, county commissioner, state representative, and state auditor, because I know that that philosophy is as true today as it was 150 years ago. We don't need more government. We need less government. We need government that works alongside you, not against you. And we need to be sure that we partner and listen and collaborate with you. State agencies need to be customer friendly, and regulations should be uniform, fair, and consistent. As your lieutenant governor, I will do that, and I want to serve you as your lieutenant governor and secretary of agriculture and rural development. And I want to help you move Indiana forward and solve the problems and bring people together. You know, we've accomplished a lot in Indiana, but we can't rest on our laurels. We must continue to challenge and dare ourselves to build a better tomorrow for our children. A tomorrow that realizes even greater opportunities than we ourselves had. And I will tell you this, that the answer is not in government. It's not Indiana's government that makes her great, it's Indiana's people. It's you in this room today, ag families all over Indiana, ordinary Hoosiers like you and me who know that government isn't the answer, but rather we are. Thank you.
Okay, with that, Christina Hale, your opening statement of up to 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. And I echo all the sentiments of gratitude for our panelists, our moderator, our sponsor. And I'd just like to add congratulations to the Agri Institute on your 17th class of leadership. That said, something none of you here know about us is that the last time Suzanne and I spent time together, we were armed and dangerous. We actually took a couple of friends from the General Assembly and went shooting together at a range that just opened in my district here on the north side of Indianapolis. And I imagine that day last spring, neither of us really imagined that we would be here today debating as lieutenant governor candidates at the state fair. But it is my pleasure and honor to be on the stage with you, Suzanne, and you'll hear from us. We both have a great deal of personal and professional respect for each other, and thank you for being here. I was so excited when John Gregg asked me to join the ticket. I was very surprised, and it felt a little weird, but honored and excited because it is an opportunity to really change the public conversation to about what matters to people, to things that are practical solutions for people. You might know a good deal about John Gregg by this point in the campaign, so I'll tell you a little bit about myself and how I've prepared myself professionally to this point. My first job after babysitting, I was a reporter for a small daily newspaper in Northwest Indiana. I'm from LaPorte County, Indiana, and I learned a lot about small government and local government there at the LaPorte Herald-Argus before becoming an early, unexpected single mom. I went to Purdue University, worked a number of jobs, and actually was very fortunate to be selected as a Rotary Ambassadorial Scholar. So Owen and I actually moved to rural Wales to do some academic work before coming back to Purdue and getting my degree. From there, I went to work at our State Department of Commerce, and for a number of years, I was responsible for marketing and legislation as it related to international trade, tourism, business development and attraction, and also agriculture. That was a very appropriate and interesting opportunity from where I was recruited by then Governor Frank O'Bannon to be his special assistant for boards and commissions. So at the time, there were over 300 boards and commissions, everything from the Indiana Egg Board to the Purdue Board of Trustees. It's pretty complicated. I know people tend to get frustrated with the appointment process, but getting the composition of those boards and commissions right really is important to how we perform government and make it practical and valuable for people every day, everywhere, and from every walk of life. Now, John Gregg asked me to be his partner on this ticket for a number of reasons, but one reason is because I've been known to get things done in the State House and that I really don't care about the politics. After I left Governor O'Bannon's office, I went to work for Kiwanis International. We have Kiwanis clubs all over Indiana, and I imagine we probably have some key clubbers and Kiwanians in this room as well. For much of the time I was with Kiwanis, I was responsible for their operations in Europe and Asia Pacific and became their chief communications officer globally, headquartered right here out of Indianapolis. But you know, I felt a calling to do something in my own community. Kiwanis is a group of business people that unite in communities all over to do good things, and I wanted to do good things in my community. And that path led me to run for state representative just a few short years ago. I currently serve House District 87, just north of here, and during my time in the State House, just a few years now, I've passed more than 60 bills, every single one with a Republican co-author or co-sponsor. It's been my honor and pleasure to serve there, but I'm very excited about this opportunity for a number of reasons. But today we're here to talk about agriculture, and John Gregg and I share the feeling that agriculture is business. Agriculture is jobs. Agriculture is opportunity. Per capita income in Indiana has been on the decline since 1962, but I think even more importantly, we have to be aware that household income has been on the decline in Indiana since 2005. People are not necessarily feeling this jobs recovery in their checking accounts, in their pocketbooks. There's a great deal of work to be done. John Gregg and I plan to double down, and you'll hear more from me during this debate about our plan for infrastructure, our plan for economic development, smarter regulation, and a stronger support for exports. Thank you so much, and I appreciate the invitation to be here today.
Thank you. John Ketzenberger will give you the first question directed to Suzanne Crouch.
Well, thank you, Gary. Suzanne, in the area of rural development, a large question, kind of. Recent reports have shown that Indiana is increasingly urban and that a lot of the economic activity has followed that movement toward urban centers across the state. The legislature, as you know, has worked to diversify economic development on a more regional basis, but there's some concern about rural areas of Indiana being left behind in terms of economic development and overall rural development. Through your office, what do you think should be done to ensure that all of Indiana, not just the urban areas, are more developed and more economically vital?
Thank you for that question, John. And I do know that we have to have a balance, and I think we saw that in this past session when $1 billion of the road funding was split, with half of it going to rural roads and bridges. And so there is that appreciation that we can't leave rural economies and rural areas behind. One of the things that currently is taking place is that the head of the Ag, and as Lieutenant Governor, I intend to be seated at the table with IEDC to pursue more aggressively those opportunities that are out there for Ag, and to end up being able to grow our rural communities and give them more options. I think that is something that we have to do. We also have to work closely and collaborate, not with just our Ag economies and communities, but with our universities and with our private sector, and we can do that through AgriNovus Indiana in order to seek out those opportunities to grow our economy. Indiana is about all of it. Indiana is not just about urban areas. Indiana is about urban, and it's about rural. And when I traveled all 92 counties last year, I recognized and appreciated that traveling through Indiana. Thank you.
Christina Hale.
Thank you. That's a great question. I'm glad you brought it up, too. John Gregg and I absolutely believe that each one of our 92 counties count and are important. But you're right, all too often economic development doesn't make its way to rural Indiana, and we see this. I mentioned that people aren't feeling this recovery at their kitchen table and their checking accounts. You know, where we are seeing it is in the plague of drug addiction and some of the really harsh realities that are facing rural Indiana today. I was in, not long ago, Union County, and there's signs everywhere, farm, farm, farm. You know what farm stands for? Find and report meth. Indiana continues to be the leading producer and exporter of crystal meth. Our rural Indiana communities are struggling, and it's an urgent and important issue. There should be a tremendous amount of partnering, but certainly a focus and a very intentioned effort to ensure that we are connecting with every county. Part of that will be in the development of the talent pipeline. Part of that will be through the opportunity that agricultural brings to employment, especially as we do pursue new technologies and develop more opportunities for employment. But it will not happen unless we embrace that as one of the tactics driving our economic development strategy statewide.
Very good. Gary Truitt, your question for Christina Hale.
Christina, and really both of you today have talked about the importance of infrastructure, roads and bridges in Indiana, the importance they are to agriculture. And the legislature saw this in the last session as they addressed that issue. But when lawmakers come back in January in a budget session, they're going to have to come up with a long-term plan for funding the roads and bridges, the maintenance and repair that needs to take place across the state of Indiana. And those in agricultural and rural communities are concerned that rural roads, county roads, small bridges don't get left out when we're talking about long-term funding for interstate highways. What specific plan do you have or would you support for a long-term funding fix for Indiana's infrastructure that will include the maintenance of local roads and bridges in rural areas?
Thank you, Gary. Great question. Well, part of the funding that was passed last year did include an ongoing committee that will continue to work on this, but John Gregg and I have published a plan. It is a $3.2 billion plan to double down on Indiana's infrastructure. What we see above the ground, I mean, it's outrageous that a third of our bridges in Indiana are structurally deficient around the state. Just as you drive from Ohio through Illinois, you can feel it wherever you go in the potholes and the awful state of some of our infrastructure. Said specifically, part of our plan is a $200 million low-interest loan fund that will be available to rural Indiana for communities to apply for community-specific solutions, whether it is working on that bumpy road or some communities are trying to take up asphalt and put down gravel road. But it's also to do things to connect people to something like rural broadband. Not every community has the same issue, so we want to be sure that we are flexible, that we have ready dollars there that can be customizable to whatever the need has to be.
Suzanne Crouch.
We all recognize infrastructure is important. We all know that it's extremely important to be fiscally conservative with our dollars. And I think what is taking place right now is that the legislature is doing an interim study committee to look at, and they call it FIRST, to look at this opportunity. And the Corn Marketing Council, through their checkoff, has funded a transportation study that is looking at 20 years out. I think that is extremely important. We saw what the legislature did last year, and we all appreciate it. But we have to have a long-term approach, and it has to involve not just state government, but it has to involve local government. It has to involve a collaborative effort that benefits not just urban roads and bridges, but it also benefits rural roads and bridges, because we've got to be able to move our commodities from our farms. And so we need to do it. We need the good infrastructure. And I will tell you this, that as a former state representative and also as a former commissioner and auditor, I know how important those relationships are. And I continue to develop those relationships and grow them. And I will be a vocal voice and a strong advocate, not just at the legislature, but in rallying our local governments and our ag community to demand that we do it right and we get our fair share. Thank you.
Megan Conant, your question for Suzanne Crouch.
Good afternoon. Both candidates really, again, have talked about growing Indiana's rural economies. As we talk about infrastructure, the roadways are one aspect of it. The other part is rural broadband, which is a challenge, and connectivity is sometimes sketchy in many parts of the states. So my question has two parts to it. How do we grow and thrive rural communities without and with this very limited access to rural broadband? And my second part is, what is your plan to fix the connectivity, especially when we look at farmers that utilize technology and need that access to be able to do their jobs?
Well, to your first question, you kind of answered it for me with your second question, and that is, you know, we have smart farms, we have smartphones, we have smart farms, and we depend upon technology, not just in our tractors and our combines, but every aspect of agriculture is moving in that direction. So that broadband connectivity and strong telecommunications is absolutely critical, not just for our farms, but for our schools, our businesses, and our rural communities. The phone providers currently have started drawing down a $51 million grant that is available not just now, but for the next 6 years, to look at expanding that connectivity and dedicated totally to rural communities. We all are paying a surcharge and have paid on our phone bills, and that surcharge in the past went to expand traditional phone service. Now it is being shifted to rural areas, and I believe that by the beginning of next year we're going to see progress, but we need to continue to not just work with our phone providers, but we need to be a strong voice in the legislature to make sure they take the steps that will connect all of our rural communities, not just our farmers, but our businesses and our schools, and every single aspect. Thank you.
Christina?
Thank you. The economics of rural broadband are extremely difficult. I actually serve as ranking minority member on utilities, energy, and telecommunications, and I've been working very closely with a lot of our telecom providers to find out why aren't they expanding. We agree this is critical to the future success of rural Indiana. We have to have broadband, but we get a lot of pushback from our telecom providers. It's not in their business plan, it's not in their financial best interest. Therefore, we are going to have to get creative. John Gregg and I, as I mentioned, have put together a proposal for this $200 million low-interest plan so that local communities can access the funds that they need. And also, we're not afraid to take money from the federal government. There is a good number of grants available from the federal government today that we could be better leveraging in order to build out this infrastructure throughout our state now. Those are our tax dollars that we have already paid. We'd like to bring them back to Indiana so that we can put them to work where it really counts, where we can leverage them in partnership with state funds so that we aren't leaving communities out there flailing in the wind. We do need broadband in schools. We need broadband just to attract young talent back to rural Indiana. You know, if you can't game at home, can't get online, it's difficult sometimes for mom and dad to get their kids back and want to take over the farm. For many reasons, this is critical. It's time to get creative. It's not time to wait, and we need to take action.
John Ketzenberger.
Thank you. Christina, energy policy is one of the areas that falls under the Lieutenant Governor's purview. And so there's been a lot of discussion about traditional energy production in Indiana, including coal as a source for producing energy, ethanol and the additional production of ethanol and the use of biocrops in that, and finally the transmission capabilities across the state. As the elected official responsible for some of that policy, what are the top priorities, and how do alternative energy production mechanisms like solar or wind or others figure into these priorities?
First, Indiana has no strategic plan for energy. In fact, Governor Pence, before he was elected, promised that he would get to work on that day one. We still do not have a strategic plan for energy. Now, we do need to diversify our energy portfolio. It's based on about 80% coal. That's not sustainable over time. Coal will continue to be a very, very important part of that energy portfolio. But we also have tremendous opportunity. Agri-Novus and that ability to innovate so that we can develop more in different kinds of liquid fuel aside from corn-based ethanol is a huge opportunity area for Indiana. It can create jobs, it can help us diversify that energy portfolio, and there are a number of wins if we get creative and we begin to take action. You know, I think it's also important that we look at energy policy through the lens of national security policy and developing energy independence on this continent. I am a little bit of a different Democrat in that I have come out publicly a number of times in support of, for example, the Keystone Pipeline. We have to be energy independent on this continent for a number of reasons, and one huge opportunity for Indiana is pursuing some of these agricultural-based energy products, as well as other innovations such as solar and wind.
Suzanne Crouch.
You know, it's about economic development. In some counties that aren't diversified, and in the entire county is all agriculture. These wind farms or these ethanol plants are a major economic development engine in those communities, and they provide jobs. I mean, not only does it give consumers an opportunity to have choices, but it also drives economic development in rural communities. And so we need to, and I intend to, continue to encourage the development of ethanol and ensure that we have our flex fuel pumps growing, and we end up taking more retail fuel pumps and making them ethanol. We need to do it because it not only is jobs, but it's about using and having another market for our commodities. I mean, almost 40% of corn goes to ethanol for production. And a third of that comes back in terms of livestock, livestock feed and that. So it's about jobs, and it's about choices, and it's about clean energy, and it's about diversifying our assessed valuation base.
Gary Truitt.
Both campaigns have been supportive of expanding Indiana's livestock industry. But to expand Indiana livestock production requires new barns, new feedlots, new infrastructure, and bigger farms to increase production of our livestock. To do that, livestock producers need to have clear, reliable, science-based regulations and permitting processes that will allow them to be profitable and sustainable. What support, what plan, what direction can Indiana state government move in to provide regulations for producers as well as support for local communities?
Well, thank you for that question, Gary. And we are a home rule state, and I appreciated that when I was a county commissioner. And as a county commissioner, I always wanted to make the right choice and the right decision for my community. And so I wanted every tool that was possible and available to me to be able to do that. And the state can serve as a partner in that effort through our Land Resources Council by providing education and training for local elected officials, not just for planning, but also for ag development and ag planning. And so not only through the Land Resources Council, but in conjunction with the Before You Build program, we need to be sure to give the tools to our local elected officials so they can make the right decision for their community. And we need to also appreciate that one size doesn't fit all, and that county commissioners are wanting to make the right decisions and to bring economic development to their communities. And in rural communities, diversifying and being able to grow those opportunities is absolutely paramount.
Thank you. Agriculture is a business. Business likes reliability, predictability, consistency, certainly in terms of regulation as it would relate to something like agriculture in Indiana. That said, I would like to challenge something that Suzanne said, just in that we like to think of ourselves as a home rule state, but my experience in the General Assembly, you know, oftentimes my colleagues often feel that they know better. And certainly it has been my experience that in the State House, we can actually defy those good business practices by making a lot of changes at an accelerated pace somewhat out of control. I think leadership has to come from the top and be set from the governor's office and certainly the Secretary of Agriculture. I learned, a special assistant for boards and commissions, how important it is when we do compose those rulemaking bodies, that people are well vetted, that the attitude is of customer service, that it is science-based and common sense minded, that we do have to serve all interests in Indiana. And sometimes they're competing when you have the juxtaposition of needs for the environment, for business, and all kinds of regulation. But John Gregg and I are committed to science-based, common sense regulation, and we will always collaborate, listen, learn, and know when we do need to get out of the way of good business.
Macon Conant.
Exports are key to agriculture. What opportunities would your administration look for to grow and expand Indiana's presence on the global marketplace? And are there any markets in particular that you would like to see growth in?
That's a great question. Exports are key to the future of Indiana's agricultural success. In the past number of years, we have divested from a lot of our foreign trade offices. Certainly, it is beyond time to double down on that. We need to be exporting our products to Mexico, not exporting our jobs to Mexico or other countries. Certainly, too, the global landscape is changing every day. In my work around the world, I've seen what it's like. I've had my mother beg me to not buy shrimp farmed in Thailand, for example. It's a big opportunity, particularly food safety and homegrown Indiana products and that brand that we're going to be able to offer the world. That said, I would have told you a year ago that Turkey would be a prime trade partner for Indiana, no longer. And what we're seeing throughout the world, too, are a lot of unexpected twists and turns. However, I have been working in the past year with leadership from the country of Israel. They're very interested not in necessarily exporting products here, but looking to have good Indiana products, particularly agricultural-based, fruits and veg, and that sort of thing, imported into that country.
We need free trade if we're going to thrive as an agriculture state, because we ship and we export most of our products. So we have to have that free trade. And I think we also have to be a strong voice, not just at our local level, but continue to be an advocate and to speak out on federal issues that would affect us and affect agriculture adversely, not just with free trade, but with WOTUS. I mean, we've got to stand up and push back on federal overreach, and we need to be sure that we have free markets to be able to export our products, and then we need to be sure we have the infrastructure to get those products to the ports and on rail. So this isn't even something that we should even be thinking about. This is something we should be doing, and we should be doing whatever we have to do to ensure that we have free trade and open markets for our commodities.
John.
Thank you. Suzanne, Purdue University and agriculture go hand in hand. We have a long history of seed development and other kinds of innovation when it comes to agriculture in the state. And we also have a long history with Dow and others. So we have assets that seem to be underleveraged because the state has reduced funding for all bio research over time and directed it into other technology research. What should the state do, and what would you advocate as Lieutenant Governor in terms of ensuring that the long history of innovation in agriculture continues into the biosciences? What can be done?
Well, you can elect me as Lieutenant Governor and Secretary of Agriculture and Rural Development. Because as a Boilermaker, I know how important that is, to have the right amount of money, to not only be able to move forward because that is such an important part of our state. And through AgriNovus, we're starting to look at those new opportunities for agri-technology also. But we need to be able to leverage the dollars we have and to pull down as many federal dollars as possible. And certainly as a former vice chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, I know how the funding works and I know how important it is. And I will be a strong voice at the legislature to ensure that we have adequate funding, not only for agrobioscience, but for our other agriculture needs, because that is what Indiana is all about.
This is a huge opportunity for us to grow AgriNovus, and that effort to innovate in all of these areas that you outlined, John. You know, science technology is going to take agriculture to that next level. This is a business that is going to continue to grow over time, and it's also a perfect opportunity for public-private partnership. You know, I'm very proud that my grandpa actually instituted a number of public-private partnerships when he was head of veterinary research at Cornell University. He actually worked with Merck and Cornell to begin some of the first bovine antibacterial, you know, I don't even know because it's science and it's something that's way too complicated for me. But it helped drive forward the meat industry back in the 50s and 60s. And there's so much more of that can be done. I'm clearly not an expert in science, but I am an expert in putting together partnerships. I too am a proud graduate of Purdue University, and we have one of the leading R1 institutions right here in Indiana that can lead the way, and a new burgeoning, I think just 1 year old, biotechnology-based collaboration in AgriNovus that can help support and bring in that private piece as well.
Gary Truitt.
Well, continuing our theme of talking about funding and money for various projects, Indiana leads the nation in the adoption of cover crops, in the application of conservation practices on the land, yet we have not changed significantly in our state the way we fund soil and water conservation in this state for decades. Currently, Indiana is still funding soil and water conservation programs with the cigarette tax. And as we all know, people are smoking less and less. Other states are putting more money into conservation. Indiana is missing out on federal opportunities because we can't match with state funds. As the legislature comes back next year as Lieutenant Governor, what kinds of new funding mechanisms would you be willing to support to make sure that we can support and properly fund conservation efforts to protect the soil, the water, and the environment in our state?
The good news is this coming year is a budget year in the General Assembly. We need to develop a menu of options for farmers to improve soil and protect our environment. This is a complicated area, but it's one that is shared by every county throughout the state. We all have conservation partnerships, or sorry, conservation organizations in every one of our counties that have a piece of this pie. I'm, once again, not a person who likes to leave money on the table, certainly not federally, and it is only good business and common sense when we can leverage federal funds through leveraging state funds. That's important. Now, specifically, we're going to have to take a look at things like the Community Focus Fund, OKRA, opportunities there, but once again, a Greg Hale administration could not be more interested in bringing our tax dollars back from Washington, D.C. to do good work here in Indiana.
You know, and thank you for that question, Gary. You may not know this, but Vanderburgh County was the first soil and water conservation district in Indiana. And as a county commissioner, I served on that board, and I will tell you, we didn't have enough money back then, and we still don't have enough money now. And so what we need to do is we need to not only look at our formula for the cigarette tax and the amount that we get, but we also need to look at, and the case I would make to the General Assembly is that needs to be changed, because that then will give us more dollars to leverage federal dollars. And then that will give us more opportunities to put boots on the ground and to address the issues that we have, like the Western Lake Erie Basin issues, where if we had more resources, we'd be able to do more. So the ability to be able to use my local experience in talking to the legislature and making the case for these and so many other issues is going to benefit agriculture, and we're going to get the job done. Thank you.
Indiana Grown has seen exponential growth in its rebirth. What are your plans to keep that momentum going and to continue to highlight Indiana agriculture?
I appreciate that question, Megan. I was in Marsh's a couple days ago, and I went to the frozen food section, opened the door, and there was a box of pork patties labeled homegrown, and they had a big sign about Indiana homegrown, and so it's working. People are starting to understand and appreciate it, and people want to know what they're eating. And when I see something from Indiana, I know it's right, and I know it's good, because that is from my neighbors and my friends in the ag community. So we need to continue to explore opportunities and to encourage more people, not just Kroger and Marsh, but more opportunities and more outlets for those Indiana products. And we also need funding. We've been able to accomplish a lot with very, very limited resources. So we need to make the case to the General Assembly that this is important, and this is what consumers want, and this is what their constituents want. And so why not grow our market for Indiana? Why not go ahead and continue to allow people to know that not only what they're eating was grown here in Indiana, but that Indiana is homegrown?
Indiana Grown will only be as good as the brand is strong. So it is in its infancy, or the infancy of its rebirth, but this is a brand that we have to develop, cultivate, and be very careful about. We have to ensure that these really are products grown in Indiana, that they're good and healthful and wholesome. We have to cultivate and protect that brand because there's huge opportunity. I've read a number of figures, but I believe it's somewhere between 10 and 16% of food grown in Indiana is consumed in Indiana. Exporting our products is a huge market growth opportunity for us. It's a huge opportunity for us to make that brand meaningful, Indiana Grown, to other markets outside of Indiana, so they appreciate and love those products that we do. Corn, tomatoes, duck, you name it. It's really been exciting for me to be in a country like Belgium and be served Indiana duck. That's a big deal. And to get people to know when you're out there what it means and to put value into that brand brings infinite possibilities. I am thrilled with this opportunity. I think that we need to double down on it and continue to grow it, because just as many opportunities as there are when we have a strong brand, if we have a weak brand, if it isn't meaningful, if we're not protecting it, if we don't have certain qualifications and guard it as we should, it could be as harmful as it is an opportunity.
So tourism. We've talked a lot about agriculture. Let's venture into another area that's not quite directly agriculture, but has its aspects. Indiana's budget for promotion of tourism and its tourism operation is much smaller than all of its surrounding states, and has been for a long time. Yet, tourism is an incredibly important part of the economy in central Indiana, certainly, and in many other parts of the state. So as Lieutenant Governor, how would you invest in the tourism program, and how would you make tourism a even stronger part of the economy here in Indiana?
Our tourism budget is absolutely anemic compared to other neighboring states or even states all around our country. That said, it is a $10 billion business in Indiana. Let me repeat that, a $10 billion business, and we have not been supporting it to the level that a Michigan and Illinois and Ohio has been to date. We have to stop thinking of tourism as just, what are you going to do with your kids on summer break? Tourism is much more broad, much more diverse. Tourism is everything from convention business, which we certainly see with the FFA convention and what it means to downtown Indianapolis. It's also film and media production. Actually, for the past number of years, I've been working on film and media production tax credits here in Indiana so that we can cultivate more of that business here as well. There is so much on the table, including agribusiness, agritourism, a number of things that we are not being organized and intentional about. We need to come up with a strategic plan for tourism in Indiana, one that is broad, that considers every angle, and then properly fund it. We have been very fortunate to date that with this anemic investment, we've grown it to a $10 billion business. Just think if we are a little bit smarter, wiser, and more intentioned, how big that business could be for Indiana's bottom line.
Thank you, John. Tourism is extremely important because it keeps money in Indiana and it brings money to Indiana and increases our revenue stream and it allows us to do more. And one of the things that I think that we can do, I mean, obviously we can increase our budget and we need to do that, but I think we can look at reaching out to our local partners and to determine ways that we can maybe cooperate more regionally. Also to promote agritourism, we have chocolate trails and brewery trails and wine trails and any kind of trail you want to think of, and we need to do a better job of making those more known throughout our state, and that is going to take us investing a little more money in tourism. And so it pays, as Christina says, it pays. I mean, the money that we're putting out is coming in, and we don't want to be penny smart and dollar dumb. We want to be dollar smart. And so we're going to have to make, and I will make a very strong case to the General Assembly, that that is what brings money to Indiana, and that is what is going to increase our revenue stream, not just from Hoosiers from in the state, but from people from outside the state.
Gary Truitt.
Activist groups have been targeting farmers, and as a result, farmers have tried to protect their farming operations from videos and from photographs that project agriculture and farming operations in an extremely negative light. Several pieces of legislation in recent years have not fared well in the Indiana General Assembly as farmers try to provide some protection for their privacy. What efforts would you support to protect Indiana farmers from being victimized by these activist groups by strengthening their ability to protect the privacy of the farming operations?
Well, a farm has every right to privacy as I do in my home. And so the ability to afford them that security and that privacy is paramount. And there's all kinds of reasons why that's important, biosecurity being one of them. So we need to be sure to continue to be vigilant, to make sure that those rights are not threatened and that people can enjoy and live on their farm and make a living and be able to do it all within the privacy that I have in my own home.
This is a tremendously important and large issue, and I would have to locate this issue of privacy over and above just privacy for farms. This is about phones and drones and all kinds of things. These have great power for good, but they also bring great challenges. And I can tell you that the legislation we've seen so far in the General Assembly is not beginning to be sophisticated enough. Soon we're going to have, and we have to anticipate, for example, drone technology. We're going to have packages delivered to our home via Amazon via drone. It's not just about airspace, it's what they can see and do and interact with our personal space. The legislation we've seen in the State House so far doesn't account for things like what happens if you have a disgruntled employee and copyright law and selfies. This is a generation of people that are going to be documenting their lives in a very invasive way with technologies that we haven't even begun to anticipate in terms of the Indiana Code. We need a very intense, broad, focused effort regarding privacy, personal, farm, business in Indiana, and it is incredibly urgent that we get started today. We, in fact, in Indiana, still have lag behind most other states when it comes to personal protections just for selfies. If you share a selfie today, you no longer have any rights to its publication. Thank you.
Megan.
You've both mentioned Agrinovus. What role does it play in your administrations to continue to grow and develop in Indiana agriculture and the economy?
AgriNovus is a tremendous opportunity for Indiana, and first I have to say I am incredibly impressed with the composition of their board. And we have private, we have public, we have all the right people around the table. Hopefully that table's growing as well to begin to innovate as it relates to agriculture. I was actually speaking with their leader not long ago, and she made the point that she was talking with a group of students, and she said, you know, hand it to me. Actually, it was her daughter's career day, and she just went around the class saying, tell me what job you're going to pursue in adulthood, and I'll tell you how it relates to agriculture. We haven't had much of a chance today to talk about developing the talent pipeline in Indiana as it relates to agriculture, but this is, again, one huge opportunity. Both, you know, earlier we talked about encouraging innovation in science as it relates to agriculture. It's also an opportunity to cultivate young talent and to spread that opportunity from our leader, Purdue University, throughout our state in high schools, in secondary education opportunities, also partnering with, you know, organizations like FFA, like 4-H. I believe it can only grow bigger and bring more opportunity. That said, it is in its infancy, and we'll have to see over these next, I'd say, 2 critical years, if it really takes hold and develops its potential.
AgriNovus, to me, is everything that's good about Indiana, you know, and that is our ability to collaborate. When you can bring together people from all sectors of our state and to be able to gather them, to be able to look at what is our future in Indiana and what role do we play. Can we be a training center for agri-tech? You know, how do we create higher wage-paying jobs and more skill? And what do we need to do in education to address those needs and to be able to hold on to our talent? And so the ability for people to come together and take a big look at the future of Indiana and agriculture and what steps we need to do to get there, not just for now, but for our future and our future generations. That's exciting. And I intend to be a big part of that and to work with them to continue to explore those opportunities and to deliver results for Hoosier families.
John?
Okay. This is a big, tough question, but I'm curious. What do you look forward to most if you become the lieutenant governor?
Wow, you stumped me on that one, John. There are a lot of things I look forward to, but first, it's, you know, I've enjoyed the process today so far. Campaigning, you get around the state and talk to people from all walks of life, and that's what I'd like to continue to do as lieutenant governor. You know, as a state representative on the north side of town here, every week I've held a different meetup at a coffee shop or McDonald's, where I could talk to my constituents from both sides of the aisle about what was top of mind for them, what their concerns were in terms of the state. And I want to be in touch and accessible and working with the people that I represent statewide. There are a number of constitutional responsibilities that the Lieutenant Governor's office enjoys. But I think what is most important is enjoying the people and doing the good work for them. And John Gregg and I are committed to practical solutions for people. There are a number of issues out there too that I say make me want to set my hair on fire, and the opportunity to change the public conversation about things that really matter. You know, some issues that aren't getting talked about here today. 1 in 6 girls by the time they're in high school have been raped or sexually assaulted. 1 in 5 kids in Indiana. We're talking about food today. 1 in 5 kids suffer from food insecurity. There are a number of issues, too many to go into today, that are important and urgent, and I'm just excited to get started.
Well, John, it's kind of interesting I'm up here today because I didn't come from a political household. You know, my parents always voted, but no political discussions. But I love serving. I love being a public servant, and I have done so at the local level as a county auditor and county commissioner, and now at the state as a state rep and state auditor, and I get it. I mean, I understand how government works at the local level, at the state level, how important it is to collaborate and to make government work for Hoosiers. And so I guess that is what excites me the most, is to be able to draw upon that fiscal, executive, and legislative experience, and to be able to move Indiana forward, to move it forward for our ag community, and to move it forward for Hoosiers all over our great state. So, I'm pretty excited, and I look forward to the opportunity to serve.
Gary Truitt, your question for Suzanne Crouch.
One issue that came up in the last session of the General Assembly really put neighbor against neighbor, in that many rural farmers in this area, in this state, found themselves being moved into town overnight, forced annexation, as cities were reaching out trying to broaden their boundaries to increase their tax base. What can we do to give local governments the opportunity to grow their local economy, but at the same time protect the farmers' rights to not be forcibly annexed into an area that they don't want to be in?
Well, I think the local government has to, they have to be creative, they have to be willing to change, they have to be willing to explore new opportunities, and they have to know how to partner. And to the extent that the state can partner with local communities on economic development opportunities, like we saw with regional cities, and rural communities are benefiting to a small extent from that initiative. To the extent that we can look at how to have more collaboration, a more regional approach to issues, I think that's extremely important. But I also think that it's important that people have rights, and that government can't just come and take away those rights. And so it's important to work with the General Assembly. It's important for people in this room to reach out to their legislators and let them know how important that issue is to them. Because let me tell you, as a former legislator, people don't reach out nearly like they should. And so that is, what, Gary, I think we need to do, and that would be kind of my advice to local communities.
Rural economic development is one of the most difficult projects before us. And I think, we talk a lot about partnerships and collaboration and regionalizing, but this is a very difficult prospect before us. When you look at the economics of our state, we can see the migration to urban areas, but we can't let go of those rural communities throughout our state either. They're incredibly important. Agriculture is one way that we plan to help grow local economies through these kinds of opportunities we've talked about today. That said, I'm very, very proud to have last year worked in the General Assembly on a bill that passed to make it more rigorous to annex local areas so that local people have a greater say in whether or not they want to be annexed. And I can tell you, it was probably the most controversial bill we worked on in the State House. There was a lot of mysterious caucusing and talking and, really rigorous debate on this issue. But at the end of the day, almost all of us agreed we have to protect the rights of locals.
You brought up the talent pipeline. How do we bring youth and keep youth here in Indiana and in the agricultural community and ag industry?
To keep youth in the agricultural industry and cultivate that, I think we have a number of assets at hand. First of all, our FFA network, 4-H. We have some challenges as well. It's been very difficult to recruit agricultural educators throughout our state. In fact, we're starting high school here this month. We have 11 high schools that have not been able to hire that critical position, that agricultural educator. That's 11 high schools full of kids that want to pursue this, that are very career-minded and interested, and now they're not going to have that opportunity unless hopefully we really hustle at the last minute, maybe. But that's not good enough, and we have to incent different ways. And if our agricultural educators are being romanced away by some of our big agribusiness companies to become salespeople and all of that, we're going to have to find creative ways to keep them here, to keep them educating our students. And finally, I want to give a huge shout out to my 6 out of the 7 FFA officer team members here who are young women. I think that is remarkable. Please stand up and be acknowledged out there. Or wave, just wave. You don't have to stand up.
Yep.
That's
Don't
really,
wave. We're not supposed to have
that's right.
participation.
I'm sorry.
Got to step in.
They're awesome though, Gary.
Yeah, I'm sure they are.
Sorry, ladies.
Good. Suzanne?
To keep our young people on the farms, we need to provide opportunities. We need to provide jobs. But we need to also provide broadband connectivity and telecommunications so that they can use the technology that they're learning in the schools to work on the farms and to make it work for them. FFFA, we need to continue to support, and we need to continue to showcase and encourage. In fact, the largest FFA club is in Beech Grove. So it's not just all about agriculture, it's an opportunity to create leaders and to prepare them for the future. So we need to create opportunities, we need to have options, and we need to be sure that we are reaching down in the high school to reach these young people and to sell them on the benefits of agriculture and being a part of Indiana. And because so many young people make the decision early as to which direction they want to go. So being able to embed more in our schools and in our high schools and encourage young people and expose them through STEM, and they can do their ag courses and their STEM courses, you know, kind of together, so and intertwined. I think that is what we have to do. It's about education, it's about opportunity, it's about jobs, it's about connectivity.
John, for Suzanne.
We've talked a lot about the more industrial side of agriculture, if you will, the larger operations and some of the things that really make a large effect on the economy. But we've seen the emergence of new old technologies. I'm thinking of a livestock farm in northern Indiana. A Purdue graduate owns and runs this, and you know, it's all free range, and they supply restaurants from Chicago to Detroit to Bloomington. Very well-known operation, and is very different than that large-scale operation that we talk about and think about in agriculture. How do you, as a commissioner, balance those kinds of interests so that you still have vitality, but you bring up alternate methods as well?
I think it starts with education. You know, we have to, at the state level, we have to partner and we have to collaborate with our local elected officials to provide them with the education, scientific evidence as to why certain things are beneficiary or benefit the community, and benefit it from an economic development standpoint, but benefit it from a quality of life standpoint. I think it's extremely important. So that education, that collaboration, and that not just educating local officials, but educating the community and educating the people that are going to be calling the local officials. Because I will tell you, as a county commissioner, and I mentioned this earlier, I always wanted to make the right decision, but I wanted whatever information I could get that wasn't based on emotion, but that was based on scientific evidence to help me get to the right decision and to be able to make that case to the public.
Once again, agriculture is a business, and this is a huge opportunity to double down on entrepreneurship. John Gregg and I published a policy paper on economic development, and a critical piece of that is support for entrepreneurship. The evidence is very, very clear. Employment in Indiana over time is going to come from the growth of small to medium-sized businesses. You described a really creative way people in Northwest Indiana are taking what they know and growing it and playing it forward, becoming employers, contributing to the local economy through ways that we hadn't previously imagined. That is something we will have to continue to foster. And if Indiana is going to be teed up for success over the coming years, better, more ready support for small local businesses, in particular those entrepreneurs, is critical. We also need to revise our venture capital fund so that when we do have some of those more science-based initiatives as well, that there is funding and support ready and available when the little guy can make his case that his big idea is worthy of investment, because that today's little guy is going to be tomorrow's employer.
All right, with that, we've come to closing statements. Each candidate will now have 2.5 minutes, up to 2.5 minutes for closing remarks. And per the prior coin flip, Suzanne Crouch, you're first.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. You know, Indiana and agriculture in Indiana has been a leader in so many ways and in so many areas. And that is because, as Hoosiers, we're independent, we work hard, we do what's right, and what I think we do best is we collaborate. In traveling all 92 counties last year, I witnessed your entrepreneurial spirit. You know how to make the right choice, and you know how to get things done, and you know how to determine your future. And as you work hard and toil the land to leave it better for your children, I want to work alongside you to make our state better for future generations. I want to be your Lieutenant Governor and your Secretary of Agriculture and Rural Development. And I ask for your support and your vote on November 8th. God bless you, God bless Indiana, and God bless our United States of America. Thank you.
Christina Hale, 2.5 minutes, closing remarks.
Thank you once again, all of you, for being here. I can't say it enough. Agriculture is business. Agriculture is jobs, it's opportunities. It's also a pillar of our economy. John, Greg, and I bring a tremendous enthusiasm for agriculture's role in our economy, and you can count on that. We've outlined a number of ways we see that we can work a little bit smarter in Indiana, doubling down on exports, smarter regulation, developing that young talent pipeline so that we have the people to take over who are enthusiastic about agriculture as well throughout Indiana. I'm sorry today that we didn't get a chance to talk more about energy as it relates to agriculture and also the plight of rural life. We have a lot of challenges out there in rural Indiana that we have to address today. We have so many opportunities as well. John, Greg, and I are here to listen, to learn, to support, and to get out of the way when it makes sense to get out of the way of good business. Thank you so much.
All right, with that, the 2016 Lieutenant Governor debate has concluded. Now, how about a big round of applause for our candidates? Thank you very much. Thank you both. You both have very busy schedules, so thank you for being here, and thanks for your leadership for our state as well. I really appreciate it. Also want to give a big round of applause and a big thank you to John Ketzenberger, Gary Truitt, Megan Conant for being our panelists today. Great job.
And let's give Gary Dick a wonderful round of applause for all his great work today.
Thank you. Thank you. Agri-Institute, Ice Miller, Indiana Farm Bureau, Soybean Alliance Membership and Policy Committee, Indiana Corn Growers Association. Big round of applause for putting on this event today. You made it possible. Thank you. And thank you all for attending and being here. Lots to think about between now and November. Thanks for all you do to help grow Indiana. Thank you.